Welcome to the Alain Guillot podcast, a podcast about life, leadership, and money matters. Our guest today is Kamal Gupta. Kamal is an immigrant from India. He has a master's degree in electrical engineering from University of Wisconsin. He became a professional blackjack player. I mean, you didn't have to go to university for that, but I'm happy for you. After that, he became a hedge fund manager for some of the largest hedge fund companies in the world. And today he's going to share his journey with us while we're talking about his book, Play It Right, the remarkable story of a gambler who beat the odds on Wall Street. Come on, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Alain. It's great to be here.
I heard from some other guests that every Indian mother wants their son to be either an engineer, a doctor, or an attorney. And it seems that her dream came true with you. You became an engineer. Can you tell us a little bit about your upbringing in India?
Yes, you're right about the engineer and doctor part. I mean, definitely my family wanted me to be one of those. Lawyer, less so. I mean, I think lawyers don't have quite the same prestige as engineers and doctors do in India. So my parents were very happy I became an engineer. And they would have preferred me to stay in India, but then I came to the US to study computer science, actually, for my graduate school. And then they would have been happy if I stayed a computer scientist all my life. Because it's kind of ironic. It's a twisted story, but my father is a professional accountant. So when I was a kid, they wanted me to be in finance. And I just had no interest in finance whatsoever. Right? To me, accounting was like the most boring thing in the world. So I was fascinated by math and physics. So I became an engineer, came to the US. And then I realized that electrical engineering, which was my undergrad, I found really boring. Then I did a master's in computer science, which again, I found really boring. And I was looking for something else to do with my life. And on a ski trip to Lake Tahoe, I came across blackjack. And I was immediately fascinated with the game. And then when I found out that you could beat the game by counting cards, I was absolutely hooked. And I devoted the next 2.5 years of my life to gambling and becoming a professional blackjack player. And at the end of those 2.5 years, I really believed that the rest of my life was going to be spent playing blackjack at casinos around the world. Like I would go from country to country, and just play blackjack. But then that didn't happen because in a strange turn of events, 6 months later in early 93, I found myself on Wall Street, and I was probably the only person at Lehman Brothers to get hired on the basis of his gambling skills. And chapter 1 of the book recounts how I used my card counting skills to actually get my job, because I didn't know the first thing about finance. And, the Lehman bond traders didn't know the first thing about computers. And it's not like I want to talk about computers anyway, because I'm not interested in them. So the only common ground we had was blackjack. So they grilled me all day long on blackjack. And at the end of the day, they asked me to count a deck of cards in under 18 seconds, which is something I claimed that I could do. And when I found the right card, they offered me a job on the spot. Like I was probably one of the fastest hires in the history of Lehman Brothers. And that's how I ended up on Wall Street without, and in finance, which is where my parents wanted me to be when I was a kid. And I spurned it. But then through a very circuitous route from engineering school to computer science to working at Honeywell and Oracle, playing blackjack, after all this, I end up in finance, which is where my parents wanted me to be.
Okay, and that's more or less you almost summarized the whole book for us. It's that you have a lot of amazing details. Let me ask you, so from the beginning of the book, I get that you were an outstanding student. You got your master in 11 months. My question is this nature or nurture? Were you always like a fast learner, good with numbers, or is this a capacity that you learn and develop over time?
I think it's both. I think I always had some native ability with numbers, but then I learned over time how to overcome adversity and how to deal with problems in life. I mean, this is a side note, and it's discussed in the book. But from a very early age, of age 15, I've been suffering from like immense physical pain because I suffer from a certain kind of arthritis, and that sort of made me deal with adversity at a very young age. And as a result, when I'm in late high school or college and beyond, um, it was a lot easier for me to deal with, you know, problems in life because I've been dealing with physical pain from a very young age. So while I had some mathematical ability, which allowed me to play blackjack, more than anything else, I had tenacity and resilience, meaning I would not give up. And I just sort of like, and the way arthritis plays into that is that I found out at age 18 that I would have physical pain for the rest of my life. Like there's no, like it's never going to go away. I mean, so that's difficult for an 18-year-old to deal with. But somehow I figured out a way of dealing with it. And then as a result, it probably made it a little easier to deal with all the other issues that came up in life.
Wow.
So it made me tough. So I was able to, and to sort of decide what I wanted to do. I didn't waste time. I mean, in the sense that, yes, I wasted time in the computer industry because I had no interest. But the whole time I was looking for something else to do.
Right,
so I was.
You didn't waste time because you were looking for that next thing to do, and it took you 2 years to find the thing that
Yes.
you wanted to do. It's not time wasted. It's
No. That's right. That's right. No, first I spent a few years finding blackjack, but yes, once I found blackjack, that was my life. That I was focused, and then I ended up on Wall Street, and then it was really tough. My first few years on Wall Street, but then eventually finance turned into an obsession as well, and I spent a quarter century doing it.
Wow. There is this tendency in the United States that it goes like this. They say that in order for you to become successful in life and to have a big salary or a big title job, you have to go to an Ivy League school. And I don't know anything about University of Wisconsin,
but it's not
wonder,
an Ivy League school.
Yeah, so I wonder what's your take on that? It's just that the people are finding more excuses for their shortcoming, or is there any truth on that, or is there something in between?
I think the answer is somewhere in between, because yes, a lot of people in Wall Street have attended Ivy League schools, and while University of Wisconsin-Madison, great computer science school, but very far away from Ivy Leagues. But I think what helped me, among other things, is the college I went to in India is an extremely difficult school to get into. So I think in America, in some places on Wall Street, and certainly in the computer industry, people know how difficult it is to gain admission to those colleges, perhaps even harder than getting admission to many of the Ivy League colleges. So I think that helped me. So while I did not have any sort of an Ivy League, pedigree in America, I had gone to a fairly exclusive school in India. So that's why the answer is somewhere in between, because I did not get hired on Wall Street on the basis of my education in India or on the basis of my University of Wisconsin-Madison credentials. I got hired because I was a good blackjack player. And I convinced the bosses at Lehman Brothers of that during a one-day interview. So it's not just that I was a good blackjack player. More than anything else, I was able to sell that story to them.
So and storyteller.
So I actually, that's right, because I think marketing is just telling a story, right? I mean, and I think if you think about, I think the one skill that's really undervalued in the world right now is storytelling. And it's, if you think about it, all media, everything from newspapers to your podcast to every TV show to any movie that's been ever made, what are they? They're all stories. So storytelling, I think, is an incredibly valuable skill. And it's something that I did not have as a child. It's something I picked up over the years. I happened to be, I had an interesting life. So I had interesting stories to tell people. And I could see the effect the stories had on people. So the more I told people stories, the more they wanted to hear them, the more I collected them, and the more I, told them. And the book is a natural conclusion of that.
Right. I'm going to ask you one more question about social issues. So India, among many things, is known because they have a caste system. You mentioned that you wanted to marry with someone from your caste. So you will maybe tell us a little bit more about that. But in the United States, there seems to be a caste system of whites, brown people, and black. And you look, I
Brown.
mean, you look brown to me. So I wonder if you suffer or had to struggle, had any struggles because of your race or because you are not white.
Well, this is the chapter 2 of the book talks about the vows I took, and my vow was not so much to marry so much from my caste, but to marry somebody from my country. Now, it's so the reason I believe that is because all the weddings I had seen in India in the up until the 80s were people getting married within the same caste. So I assumed that would be my future also, even though I don't believe in the caste system at all. But the idea of marrying an American woman, and spoiler alert, I do end up marrying an American woman. I mean, you can open the dedication page of the book and you'll see. But this whole concept of race, that's an interesting one, because it was one of those issues that came up a lot during the book publication process between the publisher, my agent, and me. And I think they believed race was a very big part of my story. However, I felt race would distract from my story. Like all the hurdles that I faced, I think a lot of people who were not brown, who were white, also faced, like the abuse that I suffered at Lehman Brothers. That was not racial in nature. And I make it sure to point out that a Chinese guy suffered the same abuse and a Swedish guy. And in Sweden, they're all white, right? So while people wanted the story to be about race, I took a very decided, path to not make the story about race, because I thought the story had so much going for it that throwing race into it would sort of just almost corrupt the rest of the story. Right. Because the story to me is really that of a person who has a certain set of morals, goes through these unexpected events in his life and comes up against hurdles and how he deals with them. And being an immigrant is one of them. Being a fish out of water several times is another one of them. And I didn't, a lot of bad stuff happened to me on Wall Street. But I cannot argue with any seriousness that it was because of my race. I'm sure race was an element in it, but I don't think I suffered from much overt racism on Wall Street. And the beautiful thing about the hedge fund industry, which is where I spent 20 years, and I actually have this line in the book, hedge fund investors and owners are colorblind. They don't care if you're black, brown, or white, as long as you make them some green. Right. So the only color that matters on Wall Street in finance is green. And there are no green human beings, out there.
Okay, well, let me now ask you a little bit about what is it with Indians in North America. I mean, the leadership style, we have Microsoft, the CEO is Indian, Google, the ex-CEO of PepsiCo, MasterCard, Twitter, Adolf. How is it? Good connections? You guys are friends with each other, and then we recommend each other to be CEOs of each other's companies. What's up with the leadership?
I think it goes back to 80s and 90s, 20 to 30 years ago. There was an influx of, and it goes back to the school where I went for my undergrad, which is the Indian Institute of Technology, which is harder to get into than MIT and Harvard combined. So because in the 80s and maybe even in the early 90s, the economic opportunities for smart engineering graduates in India were limited. That contributed to a lot of them coming to America. And over the next 20, 30 years, they got embedded in corporate America and rose to great heights, including CEO of Microsoft and so on and so forth. So I think it has a lot to do with which Indians came to America 20, 30 years ago. They were all graduates of a top-notch engineering school. And that's probably what led to the success that they found 20 odd years later.
But it's not just being good in engineering, because all these are leadership positions. Like you have to at a given moment you had to leave your coding in your bedroom and start dealing with people and manage them and have a vision of where to take the company next, which are soft skills that are so difficult to learn in university.
Right. You're absolutely right about that. But if you think about it, if like 100 such graduates come to America from India, a few of them will have great leadership skills. And those are the ones who will rise to the top. And that's probably what happened in the case of Google and Microsoft and Pepsi. I mean, I don't know any of these people personally, but I do know the environment from which they came.
Right.
And I think that is not nature. I think it's more nurture, because those schools in India are a very high pressure atmosphere. And just coming out of there is extremely like challenging. And I think and so when you're like 20 odd years old and you're subjected to all this pressure and you survive, I mean, the rest of the life becomes easier to deal with.
Okay, well, now let me ask you about your own personal storytelling capabilities. First of all, you got that job at Lehman Brothers, not because of your skills as a hedge fund manager, not because of anything else other than because you were giving them a good story. And now you are also giving us a good story with your book. I mean, the first chapter, you open it with a hooker saying, I have 18 seconds. These are the most important 18 seconds in my life. You got us right from page 1 with a good story, and we had to just go to page number 2 to find out what happened next, and then to the second chapter, and so on and so forth. So, for someone who studied engineering and computer science, which is the farthest thing away from storytelling, how do you develop this capability?
This was pure nurture. There was not nature at all. And this happened during the last 20 years. And there's this interesting side note to this that I'll come to in a second. But after I had worked in this business in Wall Street for 5 or 10 years, I somehow found myself at the center of the US mortgage market in terms of people on Wall Street. And as a result, I ended up collecting a lot of stories because, I mean, an average trading day on Wall Street is filled with emotions and stories. I mean, there's just so much going on at any investment bank or any hedge fund during one day that it invariably produces stories, and they're all very entertaining. And many of them, are in the book. And I just over time got into the habit of telling people these stories, and I found people got hooked. And the more stories I told, the more stories I heard. So the more stories I told, and it became like a feedback loop. And then there was another thing that I did on the side, which is what I was talking about a minute ago. I did a lot of negotiating for people on Wall Street against investment banks and hedge funds. And this was something done. I would stay in the shadows and I would help the individual negotiate against their companies. And one of the key skills when you're negotiating against someone is to be a good storyteller. It just sounds strange, but if you think about it, what is the purpose of a negotiation? You want the other side to give up their position and to adopt yours. And how do you do that without telling them a good story? How do you get them to come to your side of the, cross the river and come over to your side? The only way, because in a negotiation, the only weapon that is allowed are words. And you use those words to tell a story to convince the other side. So I think the storytelling, I think, is a very important skill that's required in every aspect of life, from interviewing for a job to marketing to, media to, obviously in negotiating. So I just sort of came upon it, and I found that I really enjoyed it, and I found that people around me loved listening to stories. So I did it for 20 years. And eventually, then everybody said, you should write a book. So I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. I had never written a single one-page article before in my life, but I still decided to write a whole book.
Amazing, because you kept my interest all the way to the end. Well, tell us a story. You say in the book that the financial industry is not about research, it's mostly about marketing. So open the hood and tell us exactly what's going on down there.
Well, this is, I think that in many ways, you've hit upon probably the most significant chapter in the book, where I say Wall Street research, which is an effort which has billions of dollars, invested in it. I am making a case, and I do so in that chapter, that Wall Street research is not research, it's marketing. There is no research on Wall Street, at least not from a client standpoint. And I'll give you a simple proof of this fact. If you turn on CNBC or Bloomberg TV, you'll often see Wall Street research analysts sharing their views about the S&P 500, about the various corporations, right? When was the last time you saw a Google engineer or a Facebook engineer or any technology firm put a researcher on TV sharing the latest algorithm with you? My brother runs research for a large industrial gases company, right? They would never allow their engineers and scientists to go on TV. Whatever discoveries they make, they keep it to themselves, and they use that to improve their processes and by definition, increase their profit. The same is true at Google. Any algorithm that an engineer discovers, he doesn't go to TV on TV to talk about it. Wall Street is the only industry that sends its brains on TV. So my contention is, soon as anyone goes on TV and talks about something, it becomes marketing. Just like what we are doing here. You and I we're talking on a computer screen, to be broadcast to the whole world. It's marketing.
Yes. And if they had the know-how or some secret that X company is gonna go up in value, they wouldn't share that knowledge with the rest of the world. They would keep it for themselves.
Absolutely, 100%. In fact, I would go even further than that. If a Wall Street trader comes and tells you, and there are examples of this in the book as well, that you should buy something, it's because he wants to sell it.
Right, it's too late already.
And it's too, and so my view is that the thing about Wall Street research is, once you change the word research to marketing, everything they do makes sense. They publish regular reports. Have you ever seen a research report from Google or Facebook? No chance, right? But Wall Street publishes reports every week and gives them away for free. And you get what you pay for, in these reports. So I don't think that, Wall Street research, the label research is just wrong, and it gives it a certain level of credibility that I do not believe is deserved. Because all research that you see in academic journals, right? There's a lot of research that professors put out in research, but those are peer reviewed, right? And errors are looked for and pointed out, right? Whatever research Wall Street produces, there is no peer review. And I can tell you from personal experience that in numerous Wall Street research articles, I've found and pointed out errors to the author, flat out errors. And the author acknowledges that those are wrong and still does not change them because it doesn't matter. Because what is marketing? Marketing is telling of a story, whether true or not, doesn't matter. Whereas in research that is published, whether it's like an industrial process or an article in an academic journal, there is a standard that you have to pass, which is not true for Wall Street research.
Right. Okay. I want to talk for a minute about your performance. In the book I read that you had 103 consecutive positive months. And I like to brag a little bit as well. I have been beating 80% of mutual fund manager consecutively every year by just buying the index. So
there you go. I'm a fan of index investing.
I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the industry. What's going on? How is this amazing fee that Wall Street commands from us investors worth the money, or should we put the money in the index and just?
I don't think it's worth the money. When I invest my own personal cash, I buy indexes, or I buy companies that I've researched myself. I don't rely on any Wall Street research or Wall Street recommendations. So yes, the short answer is you're right. I think indexing is the way to go. There's no point unless you do a deep dive into the stock market, there's no point in trying to outsmart the market. You won't be able to. It takes years and years. It took me 7 years to develop an investment methodology. How many, and this is full time. How many people are going to devote that much time to a problem? So if you can't do that, and you should just buy into, S&P 500 rather than trying to figure out one company or the other. And I don't believe that the fees charged by mutual funds, which sounds small, like a lot of mutual funds charge like 0.5% or 0.75%, but that's astronomical, in the long run. It becomes 5-10% easily. And on a compounded basis, it becomes even more than that over a longer period of time. And when interest rates have gone up recently, but when the interest is 1 or 2%, to give up 1/2 or 3/4 of that to a company that is probably not managing your money well to begin with, like, makes no sense at all. So yeah, the short answer is you're right. The fees are not worth it.
Okay, I have one last question for you. So you were doing good playing blackjack, and you had a nice income from that, and you were having fun, and you left that, and you came to Wall Street. Now you left Wall Street. Can you tell us why you left Wall Street?
I left Wall Street to write the book. I mean, that's what I did. I mean,
Well, you didn't have enough money?
No, I hadn't. I mean, I could have retired. I mean, the book goes into it briefly, but I could have retired a long time ago, and I kept on doing it. I had two conditions for leaving Wall Street. One of the other had to come true, which was either I had to stop having fun at it, or I had to find something better to do. And by the time 2018 rolls around, the summer of 2018, right after the launch of Exodus Point, I realized that I had a story to tell and I should try and tell it. And I decided to take my hand at writing it. And over the next 1 year, I wrote a lot of chapters, which in hindsight were horrendous. Thankfully, nobody would ever get to read them except for a handful of people. But by the time 2019 rolled around, I realized I was onto something. So I said, I need to do this full time. So I quit my job and started working on writing full time. And then it was a very adventurous road, which is a long story. But eventually, this month, the book got published. And next month, it'll be published in the Indian subcontinent.
Wow.
So, I mean, the odds against, the common strain between all these things, whether becoming a gambler or Wall Street or writing a book, the odds against all of these events working out were very, very, very long. Like, publishing a book is easily 1,000 to 1 shot. Like, as a complete unknown who's never written anything before, to be able to write a book and have it published and get a literary agent, I mean, 1,000 to 1 doesn't even begin to cover it.
You tell us that you are a gambler at heart, but all I see are calculated risk.
Yes.
So which one is?
Oh no, you actually have it exactly right. I'm a gambler at heart only if the odds are in my favor.
Congratulations.
So I mean, that's why I played blackjack, because the odds are in my favor.
So you're not a gambler.
Yes. You're right. So there is a magazine, online magazine called CEO World. I submitted an article that came out about a week ago, which talks about the role luck plays in life. Luck favors those who take risks. Right. So, and I even have a line in there that if the odds are in your favor, if the risk reward is in your favor, then you're not gambling, you're investing.
Right.
Whether it's in a casino or Wall Street or in life.
Yeah, all you have to do is roll those dice enough time. If the odds are in your favor, you're not gambling. You're just
exactly. If the odds are in your favor, you're not gambling. You're right. And I'm a gambler at heart, but only if I'm convinced the risk reward is in my favor. Well, and the gamble part comes from I'm willing to take big risks. That's which most people would be. I mean, how many Indians do you know who came to America and decided to become a gambler? I mean, I don't know of any. It's like, so that was a big risk. So that was a gamble. Coming to Wall Street was a gamble. Marrying a non-Indian was a gamble. Trying to write a book was a gamble. Now, I felt in all these cases, I felt the risk reward favored me, but it was still, I mean, things could still have gone, badly, which from time to time they did.
Well, I'm going to offer a deal for the listeners. If they gamble, I don't know what's the price of the book, but they are going to get more from the investment that they put in. It's a sure investment. I got a lot of entertainment and I got to learn about your life. I learned to learn about resilience and optimism. And I'm very grateful for the book. I wonder if you could tell us one more time the title of the book and where can the listeners find it?
The title of the book is called Play It Right, as in, play the game well and play it with a moral bent. So the word right has two meanings in this, So the title of the book is Play It Right, the remarkable story of the gambler who beat the odds on Wall Street. Now, I was a little uneasy with the word remarkable story, but my publisher was convinced that the story was remarkable, so they wanted to put the phrase in. So I gave in. The book came out a few days ago. I mean, for some reason, there's issues with Amazon, but Walmart has it and Barnes & Noble has it. You can buy it anywhere where books are sold. In America, in Canada, in the UK, and in the entire English-speaking world, except the Indian subcontinent, where it will be available around June 18th.
And can you tell us the name of your website address as well? And where
it's simply, I shamelessly copied Michael Lewis's website. His website is michaellewiswrites.com, so mine is kamalguptawrites.com.
Well, it's perfect. It's easy to remember. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.